Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite series of all time, and that is unsurprisingly the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. You can see I have my little section of Joe Abercrombie books up there. I will need a new one soon for his next book, but my gosh, this is going to be a gush. I'm just going to warn you, this is going to be a gush. It's not particularly ordered in terms of my thoughts. It's not going to be a particularly organized review. I'm just going to probably speak for about 10 minutes about how much I love his books and why I love his books. One thing I will say, these books are probably not for everyone. They're pretty dark, but I think the way that he balances humor and darkness is just exceptional. I've not read many authors who can create such a dark and hopeless world, but then have humor to counteract that in such an effective way. And Joe Abercrombie has very sarcastic, dry British humor, which is my humor. So if you like that sort of quite dark, quite unforgiving humor, you'll really enjoy these books, because I would say that's his humor in a nutshell, really. But that being said, there is quite a lot of violence. There's a lot of battle scenes. There's, lots of swearing. It doesn't hold back at all. It doesn't hold any punches. So if you don't really like grimdark, or if you just don't really like dark things in general, probably steer clear away from it. But I do think that this series has got to be one of the best ones out there, and not even just fantasy, just in general. And Abercrombie has this exceptional way of building fantastic characters. You'll hear everybody say this. His characters are unlike any other characters that I've read. You have Glockter, you have Logan, you have Jezzel, you have Baez, you have all of these other kind of side characters as well, and every single character feels fleshed out, regardless of how many words they have on a page. Logan is personally my favorite. I know a lot of people love Glockter. I mean, Glockter's inner monologues are genius. They are just pure genius. I don't know how he was able to write a character that feels so distant from your own experience, or from my own experience, but yet feels so relatable in so many ways. Same with Logan as well. Logan is kind of your typical grunt who's maybe not super intelligent, but he's got a heart in there somewhere. Logan, to me, I found super relatable. Like, a lot of his one-liners, I genuinely say them to myself on a daily basis. And he just feels like somebody who's had it. Who can't relate to that? Everyone can relate to that in some way, shape or form. And Logan is just I love his he has this weird innocence as well throughout the books. And it contrasts so starkly with the Bloody Nine, which is essentially his other personality. And I don't know, there's something about Logan that if Logan was ever a real person, I would just want to give him a hug. I would just want to give him a hug and just tell him that it was all going to be okay. His arc is also very good. I think the other character that I'll mention, I'll talk about the kind of three main ones. The other one is obviously Jezzel, and Jezzel's arc is very reminiscent of Jaime Lannister. He is your typical brash, arrogant, thinks he's the king of the world, and is just a bit of a prick. You can't stand him. You don't want to be near him. He's just vain, just everything that I personally wouldn't want in a friend or in somebody that I know. He just embodies all of that. But his arc, as the story goes on, as the plot develops, as his character develops, is phenomenal. And it's done in such a way where it's very slow, and it kind of creeps up on you, and you don't really realize that he's actually changed in such fundamental ways until right at the end. And I love the way that he does it in such a subtle way, because I think sometimes in fantasy in particular, you'll get characters who in the next chapter are completely different to what they've been doing in the previous chapters or the previous books. But it's such a consistent development for him that it happens slowly, but by the end of it, he is this completely different person who holds different beliefs and he's unrecognizable in some regards, but he's still Jezal, but he's unrecognizable in certain things that he says and does, and it's really refreshing to see that done incredibly well. I've read the first 3 books of A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't really remember them, but I mean, I've watched the show, obviously, and the way that the characterization of Jaime Lannister done in that I think is done very well. And it does remind me of Jezal a little bit, or Jezal reminds me of that a little bit. And I think it's masterfully done. Like, it's his character arc is crafted so well. And you can tell, because I reread it this year. It's the only series that I've reread recently in a while, actually. And I listened to the audiobooks, and Stephen Pacey does an amazing job of the audiobooks. If I'm not a fan of audiobooks, First Law is actually one of the only audiobooks that I've ever listened to. The other being Harry Potter by Stephen Fry, which was years ago. But the also just the way that he embodies Jezal, it's just fantastic. Like, yeah. If you want an enriched experience of reading First Law, I'd recommend reading it first and then listening to the audiobooks, because I feel like he just does such a good job of showing him as this incredibly arrogant guy that you would be very happy to punch in the face if you had the opportunity. So definitely listen to the audiobook if you can. In terms of the plot, I mean, I think, First Law is very beloved by the book community, by the booktube community, by fantasy community, and you'll hear time and time again that, there isn't really a plot in book 1, which I agree with. I think, if you're somebody who loves characters, this is 100%, this is a book for you, because his characters are really at the core of everything. Whereas if you look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, I would say it's the opposite. I think plot is at the core of everything and characters kind of come secondary. But with Joe Abercrombie, characters are first, they are the show, and they're just such they are the core of everything, and everything comes from them. And I think being able to do that in an effective manner is incredibly difficult, and Joe Abercrombie just does it perfectly. He executes it perfectly. The dialogue is phenomenal. I realize I'm going back and forth. I know I was just talking about plot, but I just need to talk about dialogue for a second and then I'll go back to plot. I did tell you that this was going to be very disorganized as a review, because this is just me gushing about Joe Abercrombie, but the dialogue is witty, it's sharp, the reason why I love it so much is it reminds me how I talk to my brothers and like how I talk to my friends. Like, it's just very quick. It's very, it's just very like kind of fluid, and the dialogue feels very real, and it's just incredibly smart and quippy, and it's just so satisfying. And when you look at the chapters from, say, like Glockter's perspective, I mean, it contrasts with his own little inner dialogues that he has, and that contrast of what he's saying versus what he's actually thinking is just, it's just perfection. Honestly, I don't know how he does it, really. I don't know how Joe Abercrombie does it. I've watched interviews with him, so I'm actually not surprised that he's able to write dialogue so well, because he himself seems to be a very witty, dry person. That obviously manifests in his characters extremely well, but it's just like the fact that it's written down and I like laugh out. I very rarely laugh out loud in books. The only 2 authors to date who have made me laugh out loud, one obviously being Joe Abercrombie, and then the other is Terry Pratchett. And it's just, I think it's such a hard thing to do, and yet he does it time and time again, and I'm here for it. I love it. I was mentioning plot earlier, so book 1, it's very, the 3 books are very much beginning, middle, and end. The first book is just setting the scene, you're getting introductions to the characters, and it is a little bit of a slow start, but you're getting a lot of world building, you're getting a lot of context about the different parts of the First Law world, what different kind of, not tribes, I can't think of another word, but the different tribes, the different groups of people throughout the land, what they believe, what they stand for, and the kind of various political intricacies that are at play. And I think he does that really well. But the first book is pretty much setting up a lot of that, so that in book 2 and book 3, you know, they both start. I mean, book 2 starts with a bang, right? Like, you're straight in, so all the pieces, all of the puzzle pieces are starting to kind of draw closer together, and you're really getting a broader picture of what is happening. I would say the first book is when you have like a puzzle and all the puzzle fragments are on the floor and they're all spread apart. Book 2 is when they start getting pieced together, and then book 3 is when you get like the full picture. But there are little, I mean, when I was doing the reread, or when I was listening to the audiobook, I remember a lot of kind of what happens in book 3, and like, he just sets the nuggets right at the start, and you just don't even, it's just like the amount of foresight that you have to be able to have in order to be able to have those pieces set right at the start, and then for them to come together so well, so perfectly in the second and the third book. Like, I don't use the word genius often, but honestly, it's genius. It's just so perfectly done. Like, I genuinely love to just take Joe Abercrombie out for a coffee and just like try and like reverse engineer his thought process on the first law. I would love to just spend like a couple of hours with him and just like deconstruct how he thought about these characters and how he thought about the plot and how he organized it in his own mind, right? Because in some ways, I think that you would have to have that big picture at the end and then work backwards from it. But I don't think that's how he actually crafted it, based on the couple of interviews that I've watched with him, which is insane to me. So plot, for sure, not as kind of there in the first book, but it's critical that that first book is spent laying down the foundation for the plot to come in book 2 and book 3. And I don't think that's necessarily a downside. For me, I think that enables book 2 and book 3 to be the real kind of core and heart of the trilogy. And that allows the pacing to really pick up and be justified in picking up as well. Because I hate it when books start fast and then you just have like no context, and then you get a bunch of info dumping that explains why that thing happened, and then it's like, oh, okay. I would have rather kind of seen that played out. So if you like books where you like to kind of see things play out and it's not really certain which way it's going to go, you'll love First Law. The other thing is that the twists are really well done. There was one or two that I guessed, and that's just because I'm a pessimistic person. So I guessed those myself, but the rest of them, there are a couple that I did not see coming. There was one at the end that was mind blowing. I read it and I almost threw my book across the room. Joe Abercrombie, don't know how you did it. At the risk of this video going on for way too long, the last thing I will mention is the overall kind of backdrop of the world that he's built. There's quite a lot of world building in First Law. You get a really good sense of different parts of the world, different characters in different parts of the world. You get a good sense of, like, you know, one is very much like a city, one is very much like a wasteland. Like, you get a good sense of that throughout the story, and I think he does a really good job of building that up. So I've only read the first Standalone, which I loved. I gave that 5 stars as well, and I really like the fact that the first Standalone, and I'm assuming the rest of the Standalones and then his next trilogy, are building on top of that world, and so you're getting this richer experience as you go through the story. One of my friends actually asked me, can I start with the Standalone? I said you can, but you're going to be missing so much depth that has been built in the first 3 books, and this book, Best Served Cold, builds on top of that. So you're just going to be missing that. So I definitely recommend reading them in publication order, because it's all set in the same world, but it's building on top of each other. And I feel like you're just going to be missing Easter eggs and little bits here and there that you wouldn't necessarily get if you read, say, Best Served Cold before you read the First Law trilogy. I'm planning to read Heroes some point this year. Maybe, I mean, I haven't had a holiday yet this year. I haven't had any time off this year because of my job, but I might be getting a holiday soon. So in that week, I'm actually planning to read quite a bit of Joe Abercrombie. Probably read the next 2 Standalones and then the short stories. And then next year, I'll probably start the next trilogy that he's created, which I think is the Age of Madness, I think is the name of the trilogy. I don't actually remember, but regardless, I'm actually really jealous of people who get to read First Law for the first time. I wish I'd read it a lot slower. I actually read those 3 books, I think, in the space of like 7, 8, 9 days. And I really wish I hadn't rushed through them. I mean, I was addicted. I was hooked. I couldn't put them down. And I just, I mean, Joe Abercrombie's books are like a drug to me, seriously. Like, when I start them, I cannot put them down. And I can't afford to do that right now because work is insane. So I need my attention to be on that. But yeah, I'm planning to read Heroes probably not next month. I might read it, well, it depends, actually. It depends when I take time off, which might be next month or the month after. So whenever I take time off, I will be reading Heroes, and then probably Red Country as well, and then the short stories. So if you read those though, I'm curious to hear your thoughts and kind of where the standalones rank in your head, because I've heard that Heroes is a lot of people's favorite, and then Bursts of Cold, and then Red Country, but I've heard pretty differing opinions in general. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. But this is probably got to be one of my most disorganized videos that I've ever done, but I just wanted to sit down and talk about First Law for a couple of minutes, because it is genuinely for me personally, it's been one of the most game-changing series that I've ever read. I compare all fantasy novels to First Law, which is probably a little bit unfair because it is quite unique in the way that it's executed and the way that it focuses on characters. But you know, it is what it is. It's just, to me, it's perfection. I think the only downside, and this is very much personal preference, is that I would have liked 1 or 2 more female characters, which, from my understanding, Joe Abercrombie himself acknowledged that he kind of wish he'd had or developed more female characters in First Law, which I believe is what he's done in the Age of Madness trilogy. So I'm super excited to see that. But to me, it's not a deal breaker. I think it's quite a minor thing. And then I think the fact that Best Served Cold, you know, centers around a female character is really cool. And Mons is awesome. Like, she's totally badass. Farah is also badass. I wish we just had more time with her, but c'est la vie. It is what it is. But yeah, that's it. That's my video. It's just me gushing about Joe Abercrombie. If you want something that's a little dark, if you want something that has the best characters that I've ever seen written on paper, you should read this book. My one caveat, which I said at the start of this video, is it is dark. It is pretty hopeless. It is violent. There's a lot of trigger warnings, but I think it's done in a way that it's not just for shock value. I think it actually plays a role in the world, and it gives you a sense of what the world is like, and that is that it is a very hopeless and depressing place to be in. But that's the backdrop on which this world is being developed and the characters are being developed. So in some ways you're almost not justified, but in some ways these characters can't escape who they are because of the world that they're in, which I think is fascinating. You know, it's that kind of idea that you are very much a product of your environment, and yes, we have agency, but how much agency do you actually have when you're in a world that is so dark and unforgiving and makes you do terrible things even if you don't want to do them? I mean, I gave these books, unsurprisingly, all 5 stars. I would give them 1,000,000 stars if I could. And I think Joe Abercrombie should be awarded all the awards. He should be given medals, everything. He's just phenomenal. His writing is absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, just go buy them, go read them, devour them, read them slowly. If I were you, if you're reading it for the first time, read it slowly, enjoy it, really dig deep into the character motivations and where you think the book is going to go, because you'll be surprised, I think, how certain things pan out. But yeah, definitely invest the time, but I would definitely recommend read it at a leisurely pace if you can. I mean, I was hooked, I couldn't put them down, but I wish I'd read them slower now. When I gave them to my brother, I told him to read them slowly, and he did. And it took him, I think, maybe 3 weeks to read all 3 books. And my brother's quite a slow reader, so the fact that he even read them in a week is fast for him. But watching him read them was a very enjoyable experience. I love giving friends of mine a copy of the trilogy because I just love hearing their thoughts and their ideas and their theories about where the story is going to go and which character is their favorite and all these different things. But anyway, before I just keep going on and rambling, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the First Law trilogy. I'm planning to do another video deep diving into the characters because all of the characters, main ones, side characters, there's something special with each one of them, and I want to do a character deep dive into them. So planning to do that maybe in a couple of weeks, I don't know, because that's one that I'm gonna have to prep for quite a bit. But go read them. Please tell me what you think. If you've read them, let me know your thoughts on the books as well. I'm really curious to hear. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody, and be safe. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.